Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. This is episode 13, week 13 of the COVID-19 series that I started after I took a break to be a stay-at-home dad for a bit, and I became a full-time BIA insolvency counselor, counseling people who have just filed for bankruptcy or a consumer proposal in Canada. That's what I do full-time now, and my son is turning 17 months soon, and but COVID-19 came up, and I said, I need to do something during this. I need to connect with people. We're also isolated. I need to find out what's going on. How are people dealing with this? I have a lot of anxiety about traveling here and there during a state of emergency. I've been realizing I have less anxiety about getting COVID-19 than I do about going out and breaking rules that people are setting. So this is, we all are learning about how we're handling this. Everyone handles it differently. Maybe listening to somebody's story about how they're handling it and what's going on in their world and what they're observing could help you, deal with this a little bit better. And of course, this is the Personal Finance Show, so we're going to talk about money, and everything is money with this, right? I mean, when a pandemic hits, you may or may not still have your job anymore. Maybe you have a job that could not be translated into a work from home situation. Those of us who do are very lucky, actually. And maybe you had an emergency fund, maybe you didn't. It's bringing up all this stuff that maybe didn't seem so important before, and now it's a way more important. Maybe you're even having to pivot a whole industry. I talked to a lot of people since this started, because I do counseling sessions all day. And this is everybody's in a different situation. We're all in this together, but differently, as my friend Rubina would say. So today, I have a Canadian on the show, which is great. Jackie Porter, a certified financial planner, and other things too, I believe, author, and I'm sure there's a whole list of things. Welcome, Jackie, to the show.
Very nice to be here.
It's so you are an author, single by choice or chance.
That's right. Single by choice or chance. For
Yes,
all of your listeners who've been single by choice or chance, they know what I'm talking about.
yes, and specifically how to do money in those situations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the book is actually was meant to be a lifestyle book because one of the things that my mentor and I identified. So Jill O'Donnell is my mentor, and she's co-author of the book. She's a lifestyle coach, and so
Okay, yeah.
we wanted to write a book that was not just about money, because women in particular, we want someone to talk to us about our whole lives, not just money, because money is just a tool. So how does money help us to empower us to live the life we want to live? So we talk about all kinds of things in the book. We talk about, aging in place. Like, can you live in the house that you started off living with as a woman who's single by chance over 45? Can you take care of your aging parents? Because single women are often tasked with taking care of the aging parent, right? Because we don't have anything else to do, of course, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, and just loving your life as a single person. There's a lot of stigma about being a single person. And especially as time goes on, I know that for myself personally, I was single for a really long time. The assumption was that I was a lesbian. I've heard that.
What, really? People just jump right to that?
If you're single in a certain age,
Based
people
on what?
just based on still being single, right? So
Wow.
there's still a lot of stigma in society about being, and nothing wrong with being a lesbian. It's just that's not what I was, and so why make the assumption, right?
Well, it's an assumption based on what people deem to be traditionally normal, and I hope that we're just diverting from that. That's just going to that assumption that you can't be single unless But even then, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be in a couple if you're a lesbian, right? Yeah,
Well, well, that's it. So, we wanted to celebrate. I wanted to celebrate single women and show them that they could, take care of themselves financially. There's a path to being empowered and being single, because it's really better to be single by choice than by chance. And so it doesn't matter what your circumstances is. We could be talking to a man too, because men have given me flack about the book. But the truth is, you don't know when in your life you're going to all of a sudden find yourself suddenly single. And it's just being empowered and making sure you're okay no matter what. And so it's all about financial independence in the end. So how can I organize my life, whether I'm with a man or with a woman or not, that I'm going to be financially secure, that I'm going to have a life that I want to live. I'm going to be intentional about what my legacy is. Those are all the things the book addresses.
Yeah, not relying on anybody else for your financial control for your future. Yeah, financial empowerment is such a great concept. I want to know about the flack from the men. What are they telling you?
They were saying, men can be suddenly single too, right? I
Sure.
mean, here's the thing. One of the things I learned when I did the research for the book was that the average age of a widow is 56. So just
Okay.
imagine,
That's so
right?
young.
So young, yet I have to pick on the financial industry, even though I represent it, because
Please.
we tend to, sell our clients a bill of goods that say, you're going to be walking on the beach with your partner
Yeah.
in your retirement and you're going to live that life. But if the average age of a widow is 56 and women or men aren't prepared to, financially be able to take care of themselves, where does that leave them? Well, the stats aren't great. It leaves them in a scenario where they can be, the unfortunate thing, especially for women, we're the biggest recipient of low income seniors benefits.
Oh,
So,
really? Yeah.
and if women divorce, we're 3 to 5 times more likely to end up in poverty as a result of a divorce. So women have to really focus on this financial empowerment piece, because at the end of the day, the only person that we can control is ourselves. And even in a great relationship, like I've had women come to me to do financial plans to see if they could leave their husbands, if they
No.
could afford to do that, right? And
Yeah.
so to me, the worst thing is to be in a relationship because of money, because you don't know how to take care of yourselves financially.
Yeah. It just sounds terrible. Do you know Sejal Patel?
No, that
She's
name does not.
Canadian. Yeah. I need to introduce the two of you because she talks about this a lot too. What you just said, the stat about being, women in retirement, low income seniors. She would have been mentioning that too. That's a big stat to know.
It's a very big stat. The other big stat is the highest group of divorcees is actually retirees. So people in retirement are getting divorced at record levels. So they're calling it the silver haired separation.
Yeah, because now you got to spend more time with this person. It's terrible.
you may
Um,
you might not have the same things in common anymore. The kids are gone, and your lives just might have drifted apart. And again, now you're in a scenario where you're forced to stay with someone that you don't even want to be with. And now those are the good situations. What if you're in an abusive scenario and you
yeah,
really it's like it's about your life
yeah,
to stay. And so understanding money is just essential. It's a skill we all can learn. And
so essential.
it means you have choices. And I'm all about choices.
Freedom, choices, because yeah, it's a prison. You're in a prison if you don't have financial empowerment. Like to stay in. Oh, it's just that's the worst thing to me, to have to stay in an abusive relationship because of money, not because you're confused emotionally. Perhaps or for the children. There's a lot of reasons why people stay. Money should not be one of them. There should be more social programs in place specifically for that reason. If something can be solved by money that would save somebody's life, that's where the government should step in.
Yeah, and here we are. You were talking about being in a pandemic. Women actually, in this scenario, there's a lot of women who are in abusive scenarios. COVID, meaning we're at home with our partners. So if we're at home with our abusive partners, there's more record
Oh,
level
yes.
happening in this scenario. And so again, it's really important for women to have options through social programs. But also, if you're entering a relationship with someone, you want to come in there having your own money. If they are coming in there, you want to know what their money situation is. You also, if you're not the person managing money, you also want to be kept in the loop about what's going on with money. There's a lot of widows that are finding out their husbands didn't have insurance. There's no insurance on the mortgage. All of a sudden, they were caregivers primarily. They were caregivers at home. What's going to happen to them? What's their future look like? You know what I mean? So you want to be kept in the loop, whether you're the person managing the money or not. Know where your money's located. Have an annual meeting if you're not the person taking care of the money as to what's going on with your money, and plan together. Because one of the reasons that people actually separate, one of the primary reasons, is because of money.
Yeah.
So what's your partner's money values? Do they align with your own? So many people are getting into relationships and they're actually only finding out about their their partner's finances after the honeymoon's over. The honeymoon's over as soon as you find out that the partner's finances look like bad credit, look like debt.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, if you're a woman, and these days women are getting married later and having children later, so you find out that your partner's in debt, they have a completely different approach to money than you do. What's that going to do to the ultimate longevity of that relationship?
It's everything. First date. That's my rule. First date, Jackie. Well,
First date, wow.
will you? Are you second? Would you say second date?
I would probably say if you know you're going to have a long-term, like if you're thinking seriously.
Once you make that sort of choice, yeah.
Once you make that choice that you see this person as someone who could be a lifetime partner, now is the time. Once the person becomes lifetime partner material, that is the time to what I call get financially naked with that person.
Yes.
You're going to get naked with that person. Get financially naked. If you can't get financially naked, that's to me a very big red flag. If you can't talk to that person about money,
isn't that crazy? Right? Like why are we so okay to be intimate in many, many ways with someone, but money still, intimacy is with money is not a thing. There's so much stigma still around this. We need to keep changing this.
Yeah, and actually, that's actually one of the reasons why I call myself a financial confidant. I call myself a financial confidant because money is still a very big taboo subject for most people. Like, you'll probably get less offended with me if we talk about sex or, some other taboo subject. But if I'm asking you, how much money do you actually have in your bank account, Bo? And, what's your credit rating?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
I know, but lots of people might take offense.
Then they do, yeah.
And so I want people to feel like they can tell me their money truths. We can have a real conversation about money, and there'll be no shame and no blame. And we can't always have said that about the financial industry because, there's been this veil of secrecy around the financial industry where only some people can have money conversations. And if you don't look a certain way, you might not be somebody who's encouraged to sit down and have a money conversation with an advisor. You might have to earn a certain amount of money. So I call myself a confidant, so people feel they can tell me their money story. There'll be no shame, no blame. What we're looking at are strategies to make the most of their personal finance, no matter what their circumstances. The other reason I call myself a confidant is people also need to know who I am, right? What are my credentials? How can I help? How do I earn my income? Like, all of these are valid conversations you need to be able to have with your advisor, and do a gut check around that. Because if they can't answer those questions, or you don't feel comfortable, and this is a big issue for women, we don't necessarily feel empowered to advocate for ourselves in these types of financial conversations, whether it's with our partner or a financial professional. But if you feel like that, my big takeaway for you is run. Don't walk from that conversation. And if that's your partner, same thing. If you can't have a money conversation with your partner, probably keep in mind, money is something you're going to have to tackle with that person the entire life of your relationship. So better get comfortable with it sooner rather than later. Same thing with a financial professional. If you don't feel like you can have a money truth conversation with someone, that's probably not your person.
And I know you get there by sharing your story, which is a fantastic story. And you're going to be on the show again in the future to tell that whole story in detail. In the meantime, I'm posting a link in the show notes for your background, because we could do the whole show talking about that. But yes, everything you said, it makes absolute sense. And the more that we talk about this, and the more people that are encouraged to join your industry, right? I mean, I've spoken to several people. One of my recent guests, Daryl Brown, who is a financial professional like yourself, and his story was he always just stayed in the background of the financial analysis thing, never front end, because he literally was like, who's going to be my clients? My dad's friends, who's going to be my clients? And of course, I don't understand that. That's a huge barrier. You just think, well, anybody, right? But then when you think about it closer, well, people want to be reflected in the people that they trust. And if you don't see yourself, so this is so unfortunate that this still exists, but we just need to keep making changes to this. That's, so again, we can have a whole show about that. Listening to your interviews, I realized everything that you said. We could have a whole series. It's like you might as well just come and co-host the podcast with me, because
that needs some time.
Right? Yeah, exactly. We just should do that, right? But again, you definitely need a podcast, and we're working on that. We're going to get you into the business for sure.
I love the way you're like ushering me into this. I really love.
No, I mean, again, so many voices, similar voices in the industry. We need as many different stories and different backgrounds and different focusing on women and women of color and diversity and everything, because as you were saying, the picture that we paint of retirement, the picture that we paint of just the image that is there is this default old white male, right? And sure, maybe I could look up and oh great, I'm reflected in everything, but I don't care, right? I don't need that, right? I mean, because I have it. Let's point that out, right? I mean, the reason I don't need all of these things is because it's always been there for me, right? So it's not important for me to, if it all changes to everybody else, it's not going to bother me. But unfortunately, for some people, they think that it will bother them, right? If all of this changed, right?
Yeah. And I, like, for a long time, Bo, I remember like having conversations with head of companies saying, I don't see, diversity. I don't see women of color. I don't see single women represented in the marketing material. Mm-hmm. If we know the average age of a widow is 56, why aren't we showing older women, single, looking confident around their finances? How could that help the industry as a whole, elevate the industry as a whole? If we're showing real people living their lives, doing well, could that serve the communities that we're trying to serve?
Yes. And the answer to that is always yes. But for some reason, it's still falling on some deaf ears. And it's just, all of this is taking time. This is a very, like, the example of what's been happening lately in the U.S. is how everybody thinks that everything is good, and then we're realizing it's not good. It just changed a little bit, and it was in the background a little bit more, and now it's all being filmed for everybody to see. The change seems a bit too slow to me. But of course, this has been going on for so long. Only in 1974 was the Equal Opportunity a Loan Act enacted, so that you couldn't discriminate against someone if they weren't a white male for getting a loan, like by law. But the thing about these laws is they don't necessarily change the behaviors of people who have been doing this for so long, right?
Right. Or their minds. Even more important than their behaviors, they don't change their mindset. So if you still have a mindset that says, you still think that something as random as someone's skin color should matter in terms of them being able to being offered a loan. Mm-hmm. So their business plan, it looks good. You see that they have, cash flow that's going to come to support the loan, but your mindset says they don't deserve it. How does that affect a whole, group of people and I mean, it's something so random. Like, I say to people all the time, you know what? Being a person of color who's also been discriminated in the industry, you can dislike me because I'm an opinionated person and not everybody loves me. And I'm okay with being considered an opinionated pain in the ass. I'm totally fine with that. But for you to dislike me for something as random as my genes, as my skin color, well, I actually unfortunately pity that that's how you feel. I really do.
I don't know what you think about this, but it seems to me that it's almost worse that racism has become implicit than explicit. You can deal with explicit racism; it's pretty clear, right? In implicit racism, especially the microaggressions and everything, it's so tiny that it's even hard to address it, and people don't know that they're doing it, so we can't point it out. And when we point it out, they say, "I'm not doing it," and it's just this weird, crazy circle that we go in, saying, well, then, I mean, what it takes is that person has to actually open their mind a little. That's the only way to stop this, right?
Yeah. And, here's the thing. This is the unfortunate but fortunate thing about this moment that we're in, right? Unfortunately, George Floyd lost his life, and it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing for their family, for his family who, has lost him. But the one good that's come out of it is this whole scenario has opened a lot of people's hearts and minds to the reality of what lots of discriminated cultures go through, right? What racism does to everyone, what racism does to a group of people. And so that's the one good that's come out of it, is everybody's minds and hearts. There's a bit of an opening there, that they can see what people like George Floyd, like me, have to live through sometimes.
And so the sequence of events here is that it took the pandemic, first of all, right?
Yeah.
So just let's go through your experience with the pandemic. So are you working from home?
I am.
So
I am.
So was your income affected though? Were you speaking in public, and was there anything like that was affected?
Yeah, I had a lot of really awesome speaking opportunities that were supposed to be coming up.
Okay.
I had a really cool opportunity with Salesforce that was supposed to come up in June. They have actually. Last year I won an award called the Female Trailblazer of the Year award, which was super
awesome.
Cool.
Super
that was an amazing experience. And Salesforce reached out to me because they actually have they're a trailblazing company. They consider themselves. So I was going to do this awesome talk on being a trailblazer in June. That went away. A bunch of other speaking opportunities that I had booked went away. And most of them aren't happening until probably the first quarter of the year. So that kind of went away. So one of the reasons I started my So What Now What, like COVID and Money series that happens every Wednesday on Instagram is because I want in front of people again and engage with people, because I really enjoy it. So I was just kind of trying to figure out a way to do that during COVID. But in terms of my income, to be quite honest, things haven't changed much. If anything, I'm saving a bit more money now. I'm not driving to see clients. I'm not driving to the office. I'm not doing a lot of dinner meetings with my clients. I'm not traveling. I love to travel, in my spare time. So none of those things are happening. So I'm preparing for the great, the tax that's coming for 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
The tax grab that's coming in 2021, because I think that's something that I should prepare for. And you know what, just making, what I call my financial fortress a little bit stronger, because the truth is what has gone up is some of my expenses. I'm spending more on my remote setup. So having my team, being able to speak to my team remotely, spending for a professional Zoom account,
sure.
Spending on things to basically, work successfully remotely. And so that's some of my spending that I've had to that's increased during COVID for sure.
And without, again, we don't have time to go into your full story, but you've been able to build up, I think you said, a 7-figure net worth over time. Now it seems like in isolation, that seems like, good for you. But the background will explain that it wasn't like it was handed to you or anything like that. Right?
No, I was raised by a single mom.
Yeah.
And I also became suddenly single at 16 when my mother, my single mom, she's really my foray into financial empowerment. By the time I was 7, she said, never rely on a man, always have your own. Mm-hmm. And she was somebody who had a million side hustles as well as a full-time job. So she really prepared me for life on my own at 16. She was constantly drafting me into all the things she was involved in, because I grew up in the 70s, Bo, and we didn't have the child labor laws that came after us, which was whatever my mother was doing, kind of I was doing. So she really prepared me to live on my own at 16, figure out how to pay the bills, work 3 jobs while going to school full time. All of those things she prepared me for. And truly, things only changed for me when I was in my 20s, after only having, at that time, I finished university, had my first full-time job, working just one job, which was like revolutionary for me. And one of the things that I was able to do during that time, because I was always good at living quite frugally, which you do when you have little to work with,
mm-hmm.
I was saving as much as I could while working at that company, maxing out their stock program, maxing out their RSP program. And so I managed to amass some savings while I was at this company, and then got downsized. And then a friend of mine, we were living it together during our time as children, because she was also somebody who was on her own from a very early age. So she had said to me, you should talk to a financial planner. And I was like, what? There's something called a financial planner. So she referred me to my very first financial planner, who happened to be a woman and a woman of color. So pretty much she was like a unicorn.
Yeah, back then, for sure.
So she's actually the person who I had my very first money conversation with. And she said to me, and I would have been like 26 at the time. And, so 16, 26, that's 10 years of me working 3 jobs and living a really crazy life. She said, you know what? You can actually make money work for you. I was like, I felt like a senior at 26. I was like, really? Like my mother was somebody who had a very strong work ethic. So that's what I inherited. I knew how to work hard. And, people would come to me. They'd see me as somebody living on my own in my early 20s and my teens. And they thought I knew a lot about money. And I was always doling out advice to people with the little I knew. But all I knew was how to work hard.
Yeah.
So to have this woman talk to me about having money work hard was like revolutionary to me.
What a life-changing thing. At 26, you were about 20 years ahead of most people, I would say, or at least 10, let's say.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So she changed my life, to be quite honest, because as she was talking to me about money and all the things I could do with my money, I just kept thinking, there's a business out there that can teach me how to make money work for me. I need to learn everything I could about that, because all I ever knew was how to work hard. And I was tired, Bo. I really wanted to figure out how I could have financial security. That's just not something that I ever experienced. So I desperately wanted that. So I said, tell me how I can get into this industry. Because I knew if I had that kind of advice throughout my life, what a difference it would have made. So that led me to, get into the financial industry. I thought I was going to be a journalist. I thought I was going to be a therapist. I thought I was going to do all these other things when I got downsized. But I became a financial planner truly out of need. And so that led me to get all my licenses, figure out how I could make money work for me. And that's what led me to create my 7-figure net worth, not having an inheritance or having daddy's money or
exactly money. Right. And yeah, so you're like, I mean, again, I want to have the full conversation about this because it just doesn't seem adequate to get there. So the point was that you're doing okay, but you've built this to and to be able to give back too, right? You're teaching so many people. So like now, for example, during COVID, you have clients that might be coming to you. Do you have some examples of how this is affecting them disproportionately, or like some people, because everyone's, again, we're in it together, but differently, right?
100%. There's so many different stories. So I'll tell you a couple of good stories, and I'll tell you some stories of not so good stories, right? So some good stories. So I have one client who was getting divorced in the midst of COVID. Wow. They literally sold their house 3 days before COVID hit.
Oh, no.
And was in the middle of changing apartments and doing all of these things. So, I just spoke to her actually a few days ago because, you can imagine it's been a whirlwind for her. And she said to me that COVID's actually been a blessing because she's been able to be home with her kids during a really like crazy time in their lives, right? Their families are being split up. So to be able to just spend that time with her kid, being able to be there for them as they go through this experience of actually, not having a family scenario anymore. That's really been a blessing for her. And just her having this downtime to kind of reflect, because sometimes she has the kids, sometimes her ex-partner has the kids, just having that time to reflect and mourn through, because even when you divorce and it's the right thing to do, it's still grief. It's still a loss. So she's been really grateful to have this downtime to just mourn the loss of the relationship and, figure out what her life is going to be like. So that's a really positive story from that perspective. So now she's ready we just spoke last week and now she's ready to plan out her life a little bit more now that she's had some downtime to think about, what she wants to do next. Now, for other people, it hasn't been as great. Mm-hmm. I've had this one guest. I do this series called COVID and Money on Instagram every Wednesdays at 5:00. And I've talked to business owners on there. I was talking to a restaurant owner, right? So she's had this restaurant business. She caters to weddings. She caters to all of these different events, who's watched her business drop 70%
all gone
during COVID, during a time she had just bought a property. and so she's, hustled to create a more robust online presence, to do more catering, online catering, things like that. But she says, if she was, was her second or third year in business, this would have been great. She'd be very happy with the results she's had. But this is her 15th year in business. To lose 70% of her sales, it's been a really tough go. Especially carrying, as I said, now a mortgage on a new property. She spent a lot of sleepless nights just figuring how to keep her business going.
Because it's supposed to, at this point in your life, after that long, you're supposed to, it's like you work hard, you hustle at the beginning, and then you're supposed to be able to coast a little bit on that, right? Isn't it like that's what they teach us? And what COVID has done is just decimated a lot of that, and forcing restarts on people who are tired.
That's right.
Tired, right?
That's exactly right. And I think that probably characterizes how she's feeling. Well, she's tired and she's trying to be hopeful because at least the phone's still ringing, people are still calling her. But you're right. And truly, some of the conversations I've had with business owners, like COVID, it's not like she had a failing business before that. I mean, this doesn't mean she's failed. And truly, like, the message I'm hearing from business owners is, you know what? It doesn't matter what stage of business we're at. The truth is we're all students of our business. You know what I mean? And we're always experimenting when we're business owners. It's not a failure. She's not a failure because her business isn't working now. It's just that sometimes when business is going well, sometimes we forget that we're still students of our business. Sometimes we can be Harvard grads, but sometimes we be flunkies. Right?
We don't get to stop, right? And we should be ready to pivot. I think getting too comfortable and in a way, maybe this kind of thing is supposed to shake us up a little bit.
It is. I mean, and I think probably the best thing to be is to be the new kid in your business all the time, right?
Beginner's mind. Right?
Beginner's mind, because you're constantly observing. But I think people are mourning the loss of what they had, and it's horrible. It's not a good scenario to be in, to be having to, especially bootstrapping, pivoting so quickly, right? Not everybody can do that. And so, here is another story of a wedding planner who does a lot of wedding event planning. I had this other guest come on. She's a wedding event planner, and she's become an officiant. She got her training to become a wedding officiant so she can actually officiate weddings during COVID, just to create another income stream.
Okay.
So sometimes it's like when you're a business owner, you just kind of have to put on your big girl or big boy pants and say, okay, the most important thing is to keep food on the table and my business going. So what can I do? What's next? And, obviously you spend time mourning, but you also have to spend time thinking about, what do I need to do to keep my business going? You just have to keep asking yourself questions and, think through the answers, because they'll come. Sometimes what I find is you just have to ask the question and your mind will start working on the answers. And maybe it's hiring a business coach and getting someone to help you as you make that, as you said, that pivot. Because sometimes you need people. You can't always do it alone.
Yeah, that's a good point. We all try to get through these kinds of things on our own. There's stigma around that too, right? It's like asking for help is like sometimes the worst thing for people. When that's maybe the only way to get going to the next thing. How can you know about something that you don't know about? How can you find out about something if you don't, collaborate?
No, 100%. And you're too close to it. You know what I mean? It's your business. It's your baby. So having somebody come out, somebody that's completely outside of the business, who knows nothing about what you're doing, and giving you some fresh ideas that might be just what you need. And the thing about business owners is we're natural optimists. We're natural, can-do people.
Yeah.
And that sometimes really gets in the way of us asking for help and doing what we need to do to keep our business going. And I'm here to tell you, there's no shame, there's no blame in asking for help. You haven't done anything wrong. And if all you're trying to do is figuring out how to keep your doors open, it's actually essential to get help where you need it to figure out the next thing that you need to do.
And so this is what you're seeing with COVID, and this has been, I guess, the last 3 months or so. Is that right?
That's right.
And but at a certain point during this time, then a lot of stuff started happening in terms of protests. As we talked about earlier, but George Floyd was a catalyst for this, but it's it's about George Floyd, but it's not about George Floyd, right? It's not only about George Floyd. I mean, there's so many incidents that have been happening, and it's just like this was just like the one that was like so in our face that nobody could ignore what they saw. So everyone's going through all this COVID stuff, and then this happens. How is what's going on right now affected you personally, like in terms of the way that you're going about your life? Has anything changed for you in this respect?
Well, I going back to what you were saying about being in this pandemic, I feel like this is, the awakening. It's been an awakening of a pandemic that's haunted, people of color for a long time, which is the racial pandemic.
Sure.
Because it's an invisible virus too, because unless you see it, you don't really get it.
Yep.
And I think what's happened with George Floyd is more people are seeing what, people of color, Black and brown people, have experienced their whole lives, which is living with the pandemic of racism, the virus of racism, because it inflicts people's minds and hearts. And it has, catastrophic financial and emotional effects on the groups that have to deal with racism. So, for me, I have to say, somebody who's a person of color who's lived with racism, my whole life, I wasn't as affected. But what I did find interesting is that people have reached out to me. White people have reached out to me during this to ask me how I'm doing, because I think it's been this awakening for them to understand what I have to live with. For me, it's been an armor I've had to carry, and it's been like a narrative I've had to hold on to recognize. Here's the invisible battle I'm always facing when I'm dealing with my business and going about my business. It's one of the reasons I, put emphasis on being credentialed as a person of color, talking about financial advice. It's one of the things that drives and motivates me to really set the bar higher for myself. It's always been the things I've actually been very aware of, top of mind, that to make sure that when people meet me, understand me, want to work with me, they can look at me based on my merit. And so that's something I've pushed for as a person of color, talking finance, just because I didn't want them to just see my color and make a decision. But I felt that, people who are, not of color, people who are white, who are for the first time having this awakening of what it's like to be a Black person, they're reaching out to me, asking me how I'm doing, which I find fascinating. Right. And I appreciate that, for this moment in time, they are actually more empathetic to my circumstances. So, I'm encouraging them to use this moment, not just to be empathetic, but to stand with me and really decide in this moment there'll be zero tolerance for racism, because it's actually good for business to not be a racist.
Yeah,
right? It's a good
surprise.
Yeah, shocking, right? I think Band-Aid just recently announced that they're having Band-Aids of color. Actually put a Band-Aid on that actually looks like my skin color.
I think there's already a company called Browndages, right?
That's Browndages.
Yeah. And that does that. And I don't know if that was just recent too, but it makes sense, right? Everything is set upon the default. We had a conversation about that in my 100th episode as well. In terms of crash test dummies, in terms of the way that city decided to snowplow their roads, right? It is based on gender, and everything is just had this default needs to just be mitigated a little bit, right? At least to start, right?
No, 100%. So to me, here's this moment that everybody can be more empathetic, but empathy is actually good for everyone. Empathy solves problems, right? Empathy actually allows, if I'm at the table and I'm a business and I'm trying to market to people, and I understand where certain groups of my market are coming from, am I not going to win more clients? Is that not what every CEO wants to do? So why not have boards be more reflected of and management teams be more reflected, so you don't create these circumstances that you don't want to be in, and you solve more problems either at the business table or, if you're in government, at the in social problems. Why not solve more problems? Isn't that what we're all here for?
Yeah, absolutely. You and I were talking about the black tax a little bit earlier. I think
Right.
before the show, actually.
Before the show.
And I might have mentioned this in last week's episode too, but the thing that Sean Rochester said in an interview that really explained systemic racism to me a little better is that if there's say the half the room is filled with black people, right? That's fine. But as the majority grows, if you walk into a room and it's as a white person and it's all black people, something feels off about that. Right?
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's not
No.
it's not that I'd be like, oh my God, like running out of the room. But systemic racism, because of the way that this has been built up, it's just you look at that and you think, this isn't right. And how do we change that? That's a thing, right? That is just like, I personally think education is probably one of the first things. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with education, and education is going to come from having more diversity. Like, people think that having representation is a bad thing, but having representation means the society that is actually there. So people who are in positions of power, if there are more representation, that means more voices are being heard, which means, as I said, more problems are being solved. Because if you have a room where you're describing where there's mostly people that all look the same, they might all come to the same conclusion, which might be the wrong conclusion because they're missing crucial information they don't know, because there's not enough empathy in the room to understand what's actually happening in that society as a whole. So what's the problem you're trying to solve, and who should be on that boat, so that you make sure you got a really good understanding of that problem. But if everybody's there and they're all thinking the same thing, coming to the same conclusion, giving themselves a self-congratulatory pat on the back for going, yeah, you're right, we all see this the same way, of course this is what happened, then what are you really missing?
It sounds so obvious, right? It's that's the thing about a lot of this stuff is it's so clear to those of us who actually have an open mind. All right, and it's just how do we get to? I think we have to sort of get in nuance the discussion to get to people who have this closed mind for them to understand, right? With examples like the one I gave about the whole room. Why does it make me feel uncomfortable? Think about that. Think about why. Why are you uncomfortable with this room filled with black people, right? Or even just people who don't look like you. And then, hey, maybe you understand a little bit about what you go through every day, right?
I was going to say, welcome to my world, right?
Seriously.
Here's the thing, and I've been in many rooms like that as a financial advisor of color who have gone, there's very few, especially once you start going further up the ladder and you go to certain events and certain meetings. I've been mistaken for the secretary or somebody's assistant many a time, just simply because, people aren't used to seeing people like me in the room. And you know what, truthfully, what that did is it just made me get used to being seen. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you, all the people, all the white men I've met in my life, because they got me really way more comfortable with being seen, because I was seen anyway. I just stick out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that you use that to your advantage. But like, how does it feel along the way? Was it very hard?
No, it is. It's difficult. I mean, I think I had shared this with you offline that, one of the things that happened back in 2016.
Yes, I wanted you to talk about this. Yeah.
When I was nominated as a finalist for Women of Influence in Finance, is, a journalist reached out to me and wanted to they were going to feature all of the finalists in this issue. And I won't talk about who the magazine was, because it doesn't matter. Okay. But bottom line is, I was going to be featured in there. They wanted to know what I thought about the industry, women, being a woman of color. And, I innocently said at the time that one of the things I thought was that it was unfortunate that there was the business was still consisted primarily of old white men, and what a missed opportunity, that there wasn't any more representation, because, if the industry was going to serve the community, they need to consider there's more women entering the industry. There's, women of color, people of color. And wouldn't it be nice if there was more representation of an industry that actually looked like the community that they were serving?
Absolutely.
So they didn't post all of that, of course.
Yeah.
What they did post when the article came out was that they put in bold print above my head that I had said that it's unfortunate the industry was still mainly comprised of old white men. And
And that's it.
in the paragraph that followed, instead of them printing any of the other things I said, they actually put the same information at the bottom of the caption in bold as well. So truthfully, most of the things I said did never get captured. And, I was pretty much pimped out as far as I'm concerned for the
Wow.
sensationalism of it all. And it was extremely hurtful. I was the only person of color featured in this, women of influence finalist. And, it really hurt for a really long time. And, I really felt like every room I entered after that was over my head. And I just felt like people saw me as a troublemaker. And it was a really painful time. And I thought I was just speaking something that seemed fairly obvious to everybody.
Yeah, it is obvious. But they just were not interested in helping change that at all, it seems.
Yeah, and what I think about that is, truthfully, and this is what I mean. This is what racism looks like. What I was said was commoditized and made to sell more of their magazines, right? And the truth is, to me, what a missed opportunity for a conversation about race
Yes.
and a conversation about representation. And this is what I mean, because if there were people of color maybe at the magazine, they'd say, listen, this is an opportunity for us to we could get more readers if we had a real conversation about race. We could be a trailblazer in this area.
And
but
yeah, and so first of all, thank you for persevering past that. Right? It's that's such a hard thing to go through, right?
It was very painful.
We've talked about this, and I can see that it's still very emotional
Yeah,
for you.
it is still very painful.
It's still a hard thing to go through, but 4 years later, you're getting the Trailblazer opportunities, which is great, right? Because I mean, did you feel like, I don't know, maybe this is a weird question, but did you feel like you knew this was eventually coming?
No.
No. Okay. You
That's
did.
a no. That's
No.
a no vote.
Okay.
Honestly,
Wow.
I would have never thought. In fact, I think that made me very resistant to do press for a while. It really, I had people after that kept reaching out to me, and I was scared to actually do another interview after that. I was hurt, and I felt really, like I said, I felt exploited in that moment. And
well, you were, yeah,
exactly. And it took this one journalist who kept persevering. She kept emailing me. She kept phoning my office and trying to talk to my assistant. And we finally connected. And she featured me in a news article a few weeks later. And it was such a completely different approach, right? She was very empathetic. She told my entire story. And, honestly, she's probably the person who catapulted me into this trailblazer sort of persona, because she put my story, she made me human. She humanized me. And then all of a sudden I had all of these people reaching out to me, and I'll be eternally grateful to her, because probably if it wasn't for her, I probably would never do another news media story. If it wasn't for her perseverance and it wasn't for her thoughtful portrayal of me, then I probably wouldn't do another news media piece. So I'm very grateful for, being humanized after feeling completely commoditized by the industry that I work with. Right.
That's amazing. And we need people to keep doing this. I feel like you will be able to do this for one or more people going forward in the future, to be able to, it's the Move the Dial campaign, hashtag Move the Dial. I seem to mention this all the time these days. That Jody Kovitz is, she's created this hashtag Move the Dial for women in tech, mostly. That was the original.
Yes, I've heard of her.
Yes. So, it's the idea that I can pick up a phone now and say, hey, this person would be good for that. And without that, the person might never, ever consider you for that position. And so the target is, of course, the old white men, right? Because they're in the positions of power. This is just how society has evolved. And we're still trying to change that. But, the old white men with the power need to be involved in this. in the
Yeah,
change.
and this is their opportunity. So, like I said, I'm grateful for the opportunities. Even though it was a very painful thing to have happen, I'm grateful for the opportunities that have come out of it. And here's the thing: it started the conversation. Here we are, 4 years later, talking about race, and truthfully, probably as a result of what happened with George Floyd, we're having a much more deeper and more meaningful conversation about race that needed to happen all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, like I said, people's skin color is such a random thing. And so for hearts and minds to be closed because of one skin color, it's a really unfortunate blemish, as far as I'm concerned, on humanity. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans.
Just to comment on that, this is what I've always thought, right? And I thought originally, let's say in the last 10 years, that the way to go about it was, well, I don't see color, I don't see race, the thing that everybody says. But of course, we've realized, in the last decade or so, especially, that no, we have to acknowledge all of the differences and understand so that we can move forward. Otherwise, it's just like if we just blind to everything, then there's no progress. It's just still there. It's simmering, right?
No, it's true. And truthfully, if you really wanted to get to know who I am, you'd really need to, as we talked about, talk about my history, my story, where I come from,
Mm-hmm.
the experiences that shaped me. That's really how you can actually measure someone's humanity, is understanding that history. And that's probably why I'm super fascinated with people's biographies. Just as a social scientist in a way,
Yeah.
and that's probably why I studied psychology, because that's what have come to realize. Really, what makes somebody human is their personal stories and their personal journeys. And so, to be in conversation like we are right now, that's the most important thing that we can do as human beings, is to learn about each other. And that's what happens when you have representation, right? More people are in uncomfortable conversations, but at the end of it, we learn.
Yeah.
If we're open to it.
Yeah, this is why I started this podcast. I wish I was back in my old format, so we tell your whole story, and we did a little bit. We did enough, I think, for people to sort of get it. But I want you to listen if you want to know more to the what is it? Oh, why can't I remember the name of this podcast? The Money Business Mindset.
Minding your business.
Thank you. Minding Your Business podcast. It's just so that is a more robust thing, and of course you'll be on the show in the future. That is the best way. That's why I tell full stories. That's why I started doing this. It helps so much to understand people, and then you can understand behavior and our behavior and your behavior, and there's something in there.
Yeah, and I think those are the things that'll counter racism, right? Is the more we actually understand that we're all humans,
Mm-hmm.
that we all have stories, that we all have biases, and that still doesn't make us less human. It actually probably makes us more human. And at the end of the day, we all have to learn how to live with one another, because we're all humans on this earth, right? The planet we live on is actually, we're all sharing the same experiences. Right now, globally, we're dealing with a pandemic, right? So as you said, we're all kind of in this together, but differently, right? So sharing, like having clients tell me their stories, why I share my story is so that they see me as a human being living in this time that we're living in, but also my past and my experiences with money that have shaped me to make me who I am today, just so again they can share their stories, and as human beings we can meet, right? And so unfortunately, some people will be open to that, some people won't, but we're going to continue to have these conversations to hopefully open up more hearts and minds.
That's all that we can do, is just keep talking about it. So thanks so much for coming on the show. This is really great. And so again, you are going to be on the show in the future. I don't know when that is. I'm not sure. The schedules will allow for me to get back to it, but this is the bonus series that I started, episode 13, COVID-19. So Jackie Porter, ask Jackie Porter, askjackie.ca.
AskJackie.ca. That's right.
Perfect. And on Twitter or Instagram, Insta, you do your.
Yeah, Instagram, it's I am Jackie Porter. And, like I said, every week I do a Instagram live at 5.
Live at 5.
And this week I'm going to actually do working moms and COVID. So for your listeners who are interested, I'm going to be talking to working moms. How are they coping during COVID?
Perfect.
I'm curious about that and look forward to that conversation.
Also, a great show on CBC. Are you a fan of the Working Moms show?
Yes, Working Moms, I am actually. It's really cool. That's one of the reasons.
They explore so many things in that show. I've been watching it peripherally. My wife has been watching all the episodes, and the ones I watch, I'm like, wow, that's awesome! Like tackling all these.
Yeah. Working Moms, it's already crazy, but now with COVID, it's like bringing it to a whole nother level of craziness.
You and I can have probably an hour conversation about each thing that we mentioned. So for now, let's hold on that, and until next time.
I'll be back.
Yeah, you'll be back for sure, if not multiple times, if we don't make a podcast together. So yeah, next week I have Danielle Desir on the show. She is Thought Card podcast and also the founder of the WOC Podcasters, as Women of Color Podcasters. So I'm excited to talk to her about that. She's got a great network going on there, and so I'll see you next week.